Hi, everybody. I am Emma from Zimt, and I'm here today with Lauris of Grow Safe Non-Toxic Missoula. They are an incredible organization based out of Montana, and their whole ethos is surrounding pesticide awareness and reform of pesticide use in public spaces. And hence, Lauris is quite the pesticide expert. How this ties in with Zimt is that we absolutely prioritize organic agriculture. And I can speak more to that in another episode. But for now, I want to chat with Lauris so we could get his expertise and learn a little bit more about what the deal is with pesticides, why we want to avoid them, etc. And ultimately using our power for good as humans to, create a better situation for all. So, Lauris, I'm so pumped that we can actually do this. We had so many technical difficulties. My fault. But we're here. It's kind of incredible.
It is. I'm glad that everything worked out and that we were able to figure everything out too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It's pretty smooth. No big deal.
So
So tell us a little bit because I'm sure too few people know about how you and your mom kind of started delving into growing this organization.
yeah, so if you want to hear kind of the first reasons like why she got interested in founding an organization that's dedicated to the reduction or removal of toxic pesticides on our public spaces was she's a ceramic artist, and a lot of artists do use some of these toxic compounds in their work. And so she was using epoxy, which is a sensitizer and makes you more sensitive to a bunch of different chemicals. And that ended up with her getting pretty violently ill to to the point where whenever she walked by a yard with pesticides, it literally would hit her like a wall and she'd be able to tell this is a yard that has used pesticides. And then she would have a reaction to that. And so at first she thought this is like a problem unique to her. It is her being overly sensitive to these pesticides. But when you do delve into the history of them and how they function, they impact us all on almost as severe as her reaction. Just she's experiencing it short term in the immediate,
Mm-hmm.
whereas a lot of the pesticides we use today are going to impact us decades in the future, and maybe we're not realizing the exact causes of these illnesses that we're experiencing. But anyways, she looked to find an organization in Missoula, Montana, where we're living, that was already doing this. And she realized that it's really a topic nobody knows about, like what are the harms of pesticides for our world, and decided that she wanted to start an organization to bring awareness to this topic that is so little known in our community. And I completely agree. I've had personal experiences with my school and on parks and playgrounds in Missoula, which has made me have a pretty firm conviction against the use of pesticides.
Yeah. I'd like to hear a bit more about that. But like referencing back to your mom's experience, I too would have zero idea. Like I when I heard your story and her story, I was just like, what? Like people use pesticides like around their home, like where they live. And to me, it was so like confusing because I was like, pesticides, like side, like to kill, like they want like murderous murderous substances around their home. I was just like, this is so strange because I had always thought of pesticides in terms of like agricultural use. So hearing your mom's story, I was just like, wow, yeah, like people do this. And then of course, like in terms of agriculture, which we'll get into in a little bit, it's like you were saying, like you don't necessarily feel the impacts, and some of us will never feel the full impact, certainly, but they're like further compounded like the more exposure you get to them. And I guess like with those sensitizers, that kind of accelerates and intensifies those impacts that otherwise we either wouldn't feel or wouldn't feel as like strongly in the moment.
Yeah. And as what you were saying in the beginning, I agree with like the fact that we are using them in our homes, these poisons, is kind of shocking. And I think that oftentimes the people using them don't even entirely understand what they're using either. They're just like, I want to get rid of a weed. I'm using what I have available to get rid of it. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times they don't really make that connection to, oh, I'm poisoning the weed, and don't really make the connection that it is a poison, which isn't going to only impact the weed or only impact the insect species,
For
which
sure.
they're aiming to target.
Because that's not how the substances are marketed. They're marketed as like, okay, you get rid of this problem, and then you have this beautiful lawn or like this beautiful like flower bed or like whatever. So it's really, I mean, like so much in life, a challenge with respect to advertising and honesty within that, and confusing the general public just for nefarious and financial purposes. So yeah, no, totally. Like we it's not like we're actively thinking like, oh, I'm going to um kill all of this and that's just how it's going to be. It's I don't even think people go that far. It's just like, oh, there's this problem, like there's this substance, I can buy it at the store, throw it here, problem solved, which is a really, really like personally, I love that ease. Like I think it would be so nice to not overthink it. But then if like your mom, you're kind of thrown into that, you have to overthink it a little bit just so you don't have these horrible reactions for ages.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then once you do start learning about it, it is definitely a rabbit hole that you can go down. And it's pretty much infinitely perilous, where for anything you can think of, I'm oftentimes like, I wonder if this is linked to pesticide exposure.
Mm,
And when you Google it, and there's like hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that are linking whatever to pesticide use.
yeah, but those don't get the ad dollars, right? So we're unaware. I mean,
No,
until
absolutely.
now. Now we're like very aware because everyone's going to watch this and learn and be horrified
I
and
do
so
hope,
forth.
and make personal changes.
Yeah, yeah, we love horrifying people into making personal changes. That's what we're all about. So you were saying like with respect to public spaces though too in Missoula, like how is raising awareness around that gone? What's been like public feedback? And what are some of the key takeaways that folks living in communities should have from this information?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of people, like you were saying, do really make the connection of pesticide use in the area of agriculture, but a lot of times on our public spaces, it's really forgotten. And we use 10 times more pesticides per acre on our lawns than we do per acre on our agricultural fields. So we're using a lot of more pesticides on our lawns than we would on our agricultural fields, and they're all the same pesticides with all the same negative consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that when people are made aware of these negative consequences, it is kind of like a wake up call that they haven't heard of this before. When they do hear it, they start to understand what the harms are, but you do have to be open to hearing the information sometimes. And I think a lot of times people do kind of seal themselves off and try to retain that ignorance intentionally, to kind of live in this happy world where we don't have to worry about it. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say too, like I would be curious as to like how receptive people are like now, like 2025 versus say like when did you start? This was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Officially, somewhat like that. But we've been working on the issue non-officially for over 8 years now.
Okay, so like very different times, right?
Yeah,
Like there was, yeah, I think a lot less,
yeah,
just a lot less going on, a lot less that we were aware of. And so, yeah, then like having these other issues brought to our attention can sometimes feel a bit doesn't overwhelming, right? It's just like adding to a boiling pot. But
yeah. It is troubling somewhat to think that we've been working on it for 8 years because in that timeline, like we've worked with Parks and Recreation in Missoula to bring forth pesticides-free parks,
mhm,
and we've seen very little progress on that in these 8 years. We've seen minimal changes in our community,
mhm,
and yes, so we're really hoping for big changes coming forward, going forward.
totally. And I think that kind of highlights just like how challenging it is to create even these like in some ways they are small changes. Like it's one community and it's one very like targeted issue. But
Yeah, and whenever I think about that, I like to think like if we were to make these changes to become a community that didn't use synthetic pesticides, I'm always kind of inspired because I'm like, we would be the first in our community and kind of be paving the way with for other communities to reference back at the steps we took
yeah.
to step away from these toxic pesticides in our community. And I think that with the start of one, it would make it a lot more easier for successive communities to make these changes as well.
Yeah, it could like snowball and you guys could be kind of like the blueprint for success. And well,
Yes.
it will be something to celebrate when it happens because I do not doubt that it will happen. It's just, yeah, like all good things, it takes far longer than one would like, certainly, and far longer than is ideal.
Yes.
Yeah, but you know, you guys will get there. It's a very committed group. And back to what you were saying about people who, you know, they just want to like fix something on their lawn, like fix some sort of issue like with whatever's growing around their home. You guys do have like a reference document on the Grow Safe Non-Toxic Missoula site, right? That people can look.
Um, yeah, so we have a while ago we published a guide to organic lawn care, which is how to manage your lawn according to organic lawn care principles, so without pesticides and other synthetic inputs.
Mhm.
And that offers some really helpful tips for ways to manage it without pesticides.
Yeah.
And yeah, which those are definitely not my areas of expertise. So it's really nice to be able to have something to reference back to.
But and speaking of your areas of expertise, I love hearing you reference these very robust studies that have been done on different pesticides used either within agriculture or you know, for like at home use or like public space use. Um, I know you referenced one about I think it was like the Chinese snail or like it was in relation to crocodiles. What was
Yes,
that?
there was like, would you just like me to,
Tell the
tell
people.
you?
I don't think most people know about this issue.
Yeah, okay. So I guess let's just talk about animal harms that pesticides are capable of causing.
Hmm.
And so whenever I think about how pesticides harm animals, I think about it in two main categories, which are first, that pesticides are killing a lot of our insects. I know that in the United States alone, there was a study that found that over 3.5 quadrillion insects are killed by agricultural pesticides every year. And so they're killing quadrillions of insects at the minimum every year, small rodents and other herbivorous animals.
Oh,
And so
that's looped in? Like
what?
the small rodents are looped into the quadrillion. I was just like spaced out for a second. I was like, okay, it goes million, billion, trillion, and then is it quadrillion, or how does that?
Yes, and then
That's
quadrillion.
slightly incomprehensible to me. Okay,
Yes, I'm
so that's
glad that you think so too. When I first encountered the statistic, I was kind of in shock for a while. And
yeah,
when you sometimes say it, it's like, oh, quadrillion. But
yeah.
then you think about it and you realize how big a number. And if you do the math, I can't remember exactly how many, but I think it's like 1.5 million insects per acre that which I'm sure it's not evenly distributed like that,
No,
but
on
it would
average.
be like, yes,
Yeah. And also like breaking it down in terms of like the number of insects per day or like even per hour,
yes,
it's completely staggering. And I think too, like so many of us who kind of grew up with predominantly city life, it's just like you hear insects and you're like, oh, it's gross. Like they're a pest. However, they're also an absolutely integral part to the ecosystem, and like
yes,
this is contributing to mass extinction if I'm not mistaken.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
we're like just starting to see those effects kind of like take off,
yeah.
unfortunately.
But to talk about like how they do contribute to the ecosystem, but like as these quadrillions of insects are dying due to pesticide use, maybe killing herbivorous animals or rodents,
Mhm,
that's removing a big part of our food chain.
mhm.
And so it's like removing the foundation of the food chain, which all of these other animals are relying upon. So maybe a pesticide won't be enough to directly kill an apex predator, but they are enough to reduce these insect populations to such a high degree, which will then leave the next tier of the food chain without food, which will could possibly die, then leaving the next chain of the food or next tier of the food chain without food and continuing up that way until it reaches the apex predators. And so that's one of the main ways that pesticides impact our animals
Mhm.
and that I think is really important to understand. But the second one, which has to do with the Chinese alligator that you were talking about,
That's the one.
is yes, that pesticides have the ability to accumulate in animals. And
Mhm.
when they accumulate, it's not that they are at the same time dissipating and going away. They will accumulate and then remain stored in the bodies of these animals to inflict eventual harm.
Right.
But yeah, so to understand this, like we can use the example of the Chinese alligator, where in 1955, molluscicides, which are a type of pesticide specifically used to kill mollusks,
Okay.
were used in China to kill a species of freshwater snail. And so these pesticides made their way into the plants in the bottom of the river. And so then, if, let's say, fish eat the plants, they will accumulate the pesticides which were found in one plant and in another plant to accumulate those two groups of pesticides inside themselves. Then, if some sort of herb or some sort of other carnivore eats the fish, then they're accumulating this concentrated pesticides from the fish inside of that carnivore
Mhm.
to kind of further accumulate it inside of them. Then, if the Chinese alligator is eating these animals and they eat like 20 pounds of food per week, so that's going to be a lot of animals,
Mhm.
um, they're accumulating all of these concentrated pesticides inside of them. So if you eat one animal, you'll get all of the pesticides that has. But if you eat two, then you're getting double the amount. And then you're storing that inside of your body until it eventually causes harm to you. It's kind of a tricky concept to explain.
No, I mean, it totally makes sense. And also, well, I've researched this a little bit before. That's the bioaccumulation. Yeah.
Yes, bioaccumulation, biomagnification.
Are
Yeah.
they completely synonymous? I thought that there was like some, I mean, maybe, minor difference.
Bioaccumulation, I think, just has to do with the accumulation, whereas biomagnification is like through the food web, I think, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if that is entirely accurate. I couldn't give you an exact
Well,
definition.
I'm, the principle stands. It's like it, and it does make sense. These toxins are quite foreign to most bodies. Like
Yes.
obviously species haven't evolved with them around in these forms for millennia, and so it's like, what are they gonna do with them? The body doesn't know what to do with them.
And it seems like the only animals that are evolving around them are the species which they're trying to kill, and just making them so much more resistant to the
Right.
pesticides, whereas those that aren't intended have no way of evolving around them.
That's really interesting. Okay, because now I'm thinking about, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I'm thinking about like antibiotic resistance, like that same kind of principle, and that we're all kind of geared to survive. And so, like, that's just going to come at kind of any, like, we're going to just keep going with that as best we can.
Yeah, there's a quote from a book that I like that is something like, the animal best adapted to survive a pesticide application are the pests themselves, or something like that. And I think that that's just such a powerful way of understanding how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and such a true testimony to like how how clever we find ourselves as humans, and yet it's like, no, like nature's just not cool with a lot of what we do, which is very fair, and so we'll come back to be like, kind of straighten things out, not without extreme casualties. So a little bit more on the animal side of things, as well as the non-human or non-animal or human side of things. So often as consumers, we're told that things like, you know, we should prioritize avoiding what's on the dirty dozen list, because uh, produce and other products, food products grown without pesticides, like chemical synthetic pesticides, are, those, like you said, like those are a little bit better known. So the dirty dozen list, like, I put that out there as a topic. Like, what
Yeah.
do you think about that?
I have complicated feelings about it.
Hmm.
On So let's define it for those who don't understand what it is, but it's just a list of the 12 fruits and vegetables with the highest pesticide residues found on them. But I have a kind of a complicated opinion on that. On the one hand, I think that eating pesticides is never good, and the more pesticides we're consuming accidentally, the worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that we need to be more concerned with supporting an industry that's basically profiting off of human and environmental suffering. And I also don't think that this list can always like accurately reflect the quantities of pesticides that are used to grow the crop.
Right.
Like,
Because it's just the
I'll give
residue. It's not
yeah,
like the total input per like caloric output or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I can give like the example of the banana, which is actually, I think, on the clean 15 list for having minimal residues because they have such a thick skin.
Mhm.
But banana plantations actually use a significant quantity of pesticides. And like a study found that farmers working on non-organic banana plantations had 80% more genetic abnormalities than those working on organic banana plantations. And then just degenerative diseases, high mortality rates, and like reproductive damage that are associated with pesticide use are also just found in much higher degrees on these chemically farming banana plantations. Um, so, like, even if the banana, for example, is not too harmful to you, I do think that we always have to be looking back and understanding maybe how it's going to affect those growing it or the communities surrounding it or just the environment it's grown in.
I mean, Lauris, are you saying we do a complete 180 as a society and become respectful and considerate of those upon whom we rely? Or like that sounds
I
a
think that would be a good place to start.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really into to thinking about others on the supply chain, but yeah, no, you're totally right. It's like it's a very like end of the line um human who is like really at the highest point of privilege in many circumstances approach to it. It's like, oh, I personally don't want to be exposed to these, and that's all that matters. Where it's like, okay, like exactly, what about the surrounding communities who you want?
Yeah, and I also think it's a strategy that these pesticide companies are kind of using to like guilt us a bit more into maybe not pushing, like maybe having us trying to not support the products, whereas really we should be trying to not support the industry.
Mm,
Whereas it's kind of like this product that you make the decision not to
mm.
consume it, whereas maybe it's more their fault that it's there in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I also have issues with the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. I'm just like, I feel like the waters must be so muddy surrounding like who gets paid off for having this opinion or that. Like, it's, yeah, I'd like to see the independent analyses. I guess that'd be helpful. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I feel like this could be part one of like an 11, but let's see what we can let's see what we
Of
can
course.
get to. Um, okay, I know that, people are really focusing on, if they are aware of this, glyphosate used
Yeah.
in grains, particularly in Canada, and you were more focused on like a global issue, which I think is very fair. Um, yeah, like how do you think that focus on glyphosates can be used to like broaden our own scope of the issue? Like, is it a decent starting point? And how would
Yeah.
you?
First, I would like to talk about what you just said about particularly in Canada and like how to understand that as a global issue.
Hmm.
I there's there was a study that I really liked that I'm gonna quote them here, but it was in the Journal of Environmental Pollution, and it was kind of looking at how pesticide drift endangered biodiversity, but they were looking in a biosphere reserve in Germany. So, quote, more than 100 airborne pesticides were detected in a biosphere reserve in Germany, of which 28 were not approved for use in the country, end quote. So that's pretty much saying they found 100 pesticides in this biosphere reserve, but 28 of them were illegal to use in Germany, which the logical conclusion would be that they floated in from a neighboring country.
Yeah,
So,
or were smuggled in and used,
yes,
but yeah.
I think that that is a pretty good way to understand maybe how pesticides used in one country are endangering those in another. Like, not to sound extremist, but like, you're never quite safe, even if your country doesn't use the pesticides. If they're used on even the world level, they're still going to be contributing to all of these greater things, maybe like climate change, the planetary boundaries, biodiversity loss, which are going to affect all of us.
Yeah.
But also contribute to the point where they're actively coming into our own country
Mhm.
and causing harm there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. And I think, I mean, I hope that we're all becoming a little bit more aware of this, even with respect to like all of the bombs being dropped in various parts of the world, all of the ammunition being used, and just how those impact our like the health of our planet. Like none of us, like obviously there are people who and animals who bear the heaviest brunt of the burden, and who are most directly impacted, but it really is coming for all of us, in some way shape or form. And so it's really incredible at this point to still have that ability to create a positive impact and kind of stop the maleffects, from starting. Um, I'm a little concerned about this running out of time, even though we have a paid Zoom, so I don't really get it. But yeah, I guess let's just wrap it up and say I think we should do a part two at some point. That's my
I think
and
that would be
I
lovely.
think that would be lovely. Lauris, thank you so much. I will leave a bit of information for folks, on Grow Safe Non-Toxic Missoula. And I mean, we didn't even touch on half the questions, so we'll we'll do this again. I so appreciate
That's
it.
how it always feels at the end of the interviews. It's like,